Hey guys, Chris from Black Flag Barbell Club. Today we're going to talk about actively using your hips in the deadlift. It applies kind of similarly to the squat, but you don't have the, you're not anchoring from the bottom. But anyway, so in the deadlift we are often told hips, 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 use your hips, wedge, drive the hips in, some variation of use your hips, yeah? And it's very important because you don't want to just be pulling with your back, you don't want to just be pushing with your quads, you want the whole thing to be helping you out. Now, I feel like a lot of people, when we initially get them to start feeling their hips, initially they will feel a stretch rather than a contraction, which is not the thing that I want. Initially I might let it slide just because, hey, they're feeling something in that general vicinity and we'll hone it as we go. But if you feel like you don't quite activate your hips, or you're always pulling too much with the back, you're not really getting that hip drive in, then this might help you out. So, I've got a bar here. Now what I'm trying to feel before the bar comes off the ground is my hamstring contracting. Yeah, so a contraction means that the muscle gets shorter. In this case, you can have longer contractions, the eccentric component, but we don't have that in the deadlift, so leave it out. So if you were doing a hamstring curl machine and you were kicking your heel to your bum, yeah, even just doing it in standing, I can feel my hamstring contract. It's very easy to cramp if you do it this way. You've probably felt it cramp in bench. But that's the sort of feeling we're going for, yeah? So if I was sitting here and I flexed my quad, yeah, I want that feeling in my hamstring before the bar leaves the ground as part of my setup, yeah? Now what this means, the reason it's important is because it means that we're using everything to, number one, create a stable position, and then number two, from that stable position, we're using all the musculature around it, quads, hammies, glutes, back, everything, to transmit force into the bar and lift it up, okay? So that's, the definition of being strong is stable position, efficient delivery of force, maximal contraction. So, if I was to I'm going to try very hard not to use my hamstrings. Now, if I just get here loose, so to get tension, I'm going to push up, okay? To get the hamstring to turn on, I'm going to, and it's not really going to move, but I'm going to try to squeeze in from the hip, okay? So this movement of driving my hip in and extending is what is going to get my hamstring and my glutes pre-firing before the bar leaves the ground, okay? Now they won't move until the bar moves, until you've initiated everything, okay? But it's very, very important that you have them ready to go, that they're already creating stability at the knee, at the hip, before you initiate the lift, okay? Because once the lift is going, much, much harder at maximal weights, you're probably not going to change what's going on once the bar leaves the ground, yeah? So we need to do it before the bar leaves the ground. So we're going to get to here. Now if I just use my quads to get my tension, I'll have a little bit of hamstring going on, just a little, just a fraction. But the main thing that I feel is those quads, yeah? So if I keep that tension, I can feel my quads burning, because they're the ones doing the work. Yeah? Now once I've got my tension, I'm going to also initiate that hip in. Now what I'm trying to do, and let's see how well I can explain this. So if my knee stays put, okay? So if this stays here, this can pull, which will mean, yeah? Or this can pull, which means, okay? For this to not move, they need to balance each other out, okay? So if this and this contract at the same amount, this will go nowhere because there's a balance of force, okay? Now what that means is that the hip will move, okay? So I don't want a whole lot of movement at the knee. I want that to be an anchor for these things to contract and to push everything up, okay? So I'm going to get my leg drive, so I'm going to quad it up, and then I'm going to squeeze in. You probably, it's going to be hard to see, but I'm going to feel my hamstring, so I'm going to leg drive, I will feel my quads. Hip drive, squeezing my bum in, I will feel my hamstrings as well as the quads that I already have. then I can go assuming everything else is set, okay? So I've got nothing, no tension. Leg drive, long arms, can feel my quad tension. Hip drive, can feel my hammies, can feel my glutes, big brace. And on the way up, I'll feel everything. I'll feel quad, hammy, glute, contract together, okay? If I don't feel my hamstrings and my glutes on that way up, I've probably not set the hip drive well enough, okay? Doesn't mean you're not using them. You can't do the movement. You can't do this without using hamstrings and glutes. Can't do it. Impossible. But if you're not getting the most out of them, then you're probably leaving kilos off the bar. You're probably leaving yourself open to technical deficiencies that you otherwise wouldn't. Okay? Now, the blocks I find really useful for teaching hip drive because they take out that little bit of the initial, like it's a bit harder to feel right off the ground. If you give it just a little bit of height, we've already got a slightly elevated hip position, much easier to feel this contract, and then over time you can take to the floor, know what you're looking for, feel it off the floor, and Bob's your uncle. Good stuff, brilliant. But initially, teaching hip drive, I'll teach it off the blocks. I put a lot of block pulls as a second day accessory movement for this very reason, because most people need to keep practice of that hip drive in. And to that end, if you've got block pulls and you're not focusing on what the block pull is trying to teach you, you're probably not getting the most out of your block pull. Yeah, you want to be, like, everything is in the program for a reason. Why is the block pull there? Yeah, it's not just so you can go real heavy, put it on Instagram, huzzah, 1,000 likes. It's to teach you something, it's to refine a movement pattern that will then benefit your max deadlift, assuming you're a powerlifter training for strength, whatever it may be. Alright, so we're going to do a few sets. I'll film on my way up, I'll film my top set of the day, and we'll see how well I do this. But basics of it is feel this, feel this, feel this, then you lift. All of that feeling happens before the bar leaves the floor. Okay? Very important that you feel it before the bar leaves the floor. You've set everything up, you've sequenced everything. Alright, this is what we're going to lift with. Okay? I don't want to be feeling a whole lot of this. I want to let all the big stuff from my hip down do the work. Okay? So I'm going to grab the bar. Nice and loose. Get my tension, so I'm pushing up with my quads. I'm going to squeeze my hips in, so I'm going to feel that hamstring and glute contraction. Big brace. Alright, so let's see how we go on the way up. Alright, so I realized while I was watching the video that I actually forgot to show the difference between feeling a stretch in your hamstring versus feeling a contraction in your hamstring in terms of what that might look like on the bar. So, here we go. Alright, so if I was going to feel a stretch, I would be lengthening my hamstring. Okay? So, I would set up, and then to feel the stretch, I would raise my hips, and I can feel a stretch now. Okay? Man, this cough is killing me. That is not what we want, because it does not, like, we're creating length at the hamstring, which is going to make it harder for it to contract well when we get to the heavy weights. You're putting it in a worse position to contract hard. Okay, the longer a muscle is, in general, the weaker the position it is in. You're weakest at the bottom of a curl. You're weakest at the bottom of a squat because the quad is super long. All that good stuff. So, if we see someone who sets up, and then when we tell them to, alright, like, get your tension, wedge the hip, and we'll see them go like that, then we know that they're stretching their hip rather than contracting their hip. Okay? So, what I want to see is we're going to get our tension from the quad, so we're going to push up, and then we're going to wedge in, so there's not going to be a whole lot of movement. Okay, I might even be right here, like cueing them, like on the hamstring, like use this, blah blah blah. But, so if I get my tension, pushing up, wedging in. There's not a whole lot of movement. Hard to see, okay? That might be why I'm there, like feeling physically, are they contracting their hamstring, okay? Now, if they're, as I said, if they're getting their tension by stretching, initially I might let them feel that for a while and then take them to a hamstring curl or like maybe even a single leg bridge or a double leg bridge, and then compare that feeling, okay? So we can do like almost like an RDL where we stretch it out. All right, that's that feeling. That's the similar feeling that they're getting in their deadlift sit up. And then I show them a hamstring curl, bridge, whatever, like, oh, that's a different feeling. That's a contraction versus stretch, yeah? And then we educate them that way. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world, you just gotta teach them, hone it in. At least they're feeling something, which is good. If they're looking for a feeling, the hardest part is done. They're actually engaged in the lift, they're looking, like they're cueing themselves, I've gotta feel this, all right, cool. We just have to change what you're feeling for to the right thing. Okay? So stretching versus contracting, make sure you are noticing the difference. Okay? We don't want to be stretching it out. We want to be getting tight, wedging, and coming in. So we're going to see how I go setting my hip wedge. Hopefully I do it correctly after all this talk and I don't end up sinking up. I do tend to be someone who will sit lower than they have to and then I will wind up and in. So we'll see if I do that today. I'm going to try not to because it confuses things a little bit when you're trying to look for, all right, hips up is bad, hips in is good, but if I do both then it looks bad, if that makes sense. So I'm going to try not to do it. Let's see how we go. How'd I do, Ma? We'll check the video. Felt pretty good. Again, you're feeling for the hamstrings contracting alongside everything else. So brace, quads on, hammies and glutes, wedging in, not stretching out, wedging in. Alright, so this will be 220 for hopefully 3. This will likely be the top set of the day. This is the first day I've done block pulls in a long time, so probably just leave it here, even if this feels pretty good, just to adjust everything. Same as the 180, hopefully we'll avoid doing my usual down, tension, just because it might confuse people watching. So let's see how we go setting our wedge. You shouldn't see me come out and stretch my hamstrings because that would be less ideal, less mechanically advantageous than if I get them contracting, my hips loaded to go in right from the get-go, okay? So you're gonna see tension, tension, go. It'll probably be very quick in terms of doing both at the same time, but what I don't want to do is go up and then that way, because then I've taken my legs and my hips more out of the lift than contributing to the lift. So first one felt good, second one felt lazy. I didn't quite feel, I'm talking really loud because my head is kind of spinning. Second one didn't feel like I set my hips as well, and it also felt like my back rounded a bit because of that, so it'd be interesting to see if the video shows the same. Third one, because I felt the second one was a bit shit, third one felt pretty good because I was more on top of it because it felt shit on the second one. Alright, I'm gonna catch my breath, then we'll talk. Alright guys, so hopefully that was helpful. The primary purpose of wedging the hips is to sequence everything together correctly, so you're using all of the big muscle groups that you want to lift the weight. Yeah, you don't want to leave any out. You don't want hamstrings to be lazy. You don't want glutes to be lazy. As I said earlier in the video, if you stand up with weight in your hand, you have to have used your hamstring and your glutes. You can't not use them, but you want to make sure that you're using everything to the fullest extent. Yeah. So the reason I like block pulls, as I said earlier, takes out that little bit of momentum, lets you really teach the position and the wedge in. I will very often treat these as a strengthening hypertrophy exercise, so I'll do higher reps with these, maybe 6s, 8s, and then depending on the person, so someone like me who is much weaker off the blocks, I will use these in the strength phase as well. If I can pull it off the blocks, I know 100% I can pull it off the floor, provided I don't fuck something up, because I'm weaker off the block. Yeah, so if I add leg drive and momentum to it, should be a much easier lift. So play around with it, check out your own lifters if you're a coach, check out your own technique and movement if you're a lifter yourself, like film your stuff. It's easiest to see what I'm talking about from the side, which is why I've set it up here today, but you can see it from like a 3/4 angle if you're also looking for other things like knee position, blah blah blah. But check it out, see how you're doing, practice what we've talked about and let me know if it helps. Any questions, as I said, leave a comment below, wing us an email, hit us up on Facebook, whatever. If you want to see anything in particular in a future video, let us know as well. Alright, take it easy.